Hey everyone, Anders Sundquist here, founder of Flawless Recruit, host of the Lean In podcast. And today we're going to talk AI, both the recruiting landscape and the tools and infrastructure used to scale an AI startup. And who better than to share this knowledge with us than Scott Bianco? Scott comes by way as the founding talent partner at Hebbia AI, also an alumni from Netflix and Google. So he knows a thing or two about scaling top tier talent teams. And today we're going to talk about holistically the AI recruiting landscape. So if you're tuning in today, you're a talent or people leader or a recruiter or sourcer and want to know more about how to source AI candidates, tools and infrastructure, et cetera, Scott's going to drop some knowledge on us. So without further ado, Scott, fill us in on your role today, but then how you got there. What's been your journey into talent acquisition?
Yeah. And thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this, Anders.
Yeah,
Uh,
same.
journey to recruiting. I didn't grow up always wanting to be a recruiter. I think that's not a common path, but kind of fell into it. Shortly out of college, started on the agency side, very similar to others.
Oh yeah, heard
You
that
know,
story.
yeah. And then from there, I actually found that I really loved it, particularly when I moved in house. And started kind of across like the financial services space with some credit rating agencies, Moody's and S&P. What led me through that, and really most of my career has just been like my curiosity, wanting to learn about a specific space. And being in New York, being close to Wall Street, I
Yeah.
thought that was a really cool place to start. Did some time there, built out a team in Denver with S&P, was contacted by Netflix to help build out their content strategy team, which was like a really fascinating problem space. They're basically like going through, viewership data, analyzing the bingeability of certain content to, you know, back into their methodology for assigning valuations on content, which was
Oh,
like
wow.
just really bizarre, but really interesting. So awesome experience. Some of the best talent I've ever worked with. Got to do a couple years in LA, and then came back to New York with Google, where I started kind of on the YouTube and search side. Then was tapped to a team, in talent and in engineering across like the AR VR side,
Yeah.
as well as for Google Labs, which is like a really cool space. I think it's since been rebranded to Technology and Society, but they do a lot
Sure.
of like their it's kind of like their startup incubator within Google. So
Yeah.
they're doing a lot of like emerging kind of fringe tech, which is where a lot of like the I started getting exposure into AI. Continuing with the AR VR stuff, some blockchain, generative media. Bard started to come about. I got to
Oh
dog
yeah.
food that. So I was deep into like LLMs and learning what they were, and then sure enough, Chat GPT dropped. The whole world kind of felt those waves, and yeah, and then there was a couple of Google engineers who made the move to Hebbia, and I had this like entrepreneurial itch, that I didn't quite know how to reach or scratch,
Yeah.
and I didn't really feel that like going the agency, like starting my own agency, really resonated with my goals. And I was like, a startup could be really cool, and especially one that's in AI, part of this wave that I don't want to miss out on. So met with the founding team, met with our CEO, was just absolutely captivated by the raw talent and all of the momentum they'd already built, as like an early Series A company,
Yeah.
and joined on the ground floor. Man, it was
Founding recruiter. That's as
it was
that's as ground floor as you can get. That's the basement building the foundation.
basement, dude, basement
Yeah.
work. But it's been like one the most rewarding like, chapter in my life. Being
Yeah.
able to build a phenomenal company, with some of the brightest talent that goes on to be some of your closest friends.
Yeah.
Um,
A cool
and
opportunity.
yeah, we're all just kind of winning together. It's been great. It's been a great ride. So, yeah, now continuing to really grow out that talent team, and yeah, I think we're since that time we started around 20 folks. Now we're
Yeah.
approaching 70, and we should be closer to
Wow.
200. by the end of
3x,
next year.
4x growth, talk about hyper growth. Well, let's talk a bit about that. I mean, as we've gotten to know each other, I was inspired with your energy and enthusiasm for the space, but your knowledge with building talent infrastructure, the tools that go along with that,
Mhm.
your depth of knowledge in the AI and ML space, this niche tech background, this deep tech background that you have is clearly
Mhm.
working. And I want to unpack that. And frankly, I want to unpack some of this AI vernacular, this ML vernacular.
Yeah.
And if you're tuning in today and you want to learn more, reach out to Scott directly to learn more about some of this stuff and what Hebbia does. But first, let's start with that. So, Hebbia is the AI interface for knowledge work.
Mhm.
So, what does that mean?
Yeah. Good question. What is knowledge work even, right?
Yeah, what the heck? Yeah,
Um, yeah. So I mean, just to break that down, we say we are the interface. That means we're solving the product problem to AI. When it comes to AI, we're working very much with large language models. And when we talk about knowledge workers, that's going to be, white collar professional type jobs.
got
If
it.
that's going to be private equity analysts, lawyers, government officials, really any type of enterprise role. What we do is we essentially have built like a, distributed systems indexer that enables folks to run a semantic search across all of their unstructured documents. And, we use agentic capabilities to automate workflows, saving countless hours from the mundane tasks
Yeah,
of, the typical due diligence process that anyone might go through.
yeah,
Now that may be super vague, and the reality is there's like countless use cases because we're designing it in such a way that it's a sandbox environment kind of general purpose tool.
yeah, yeah.
I use it for recruiting. We're not selling to, recruiting
Wow.
shops right now, but that's
Yeah.
kind of like an example of the broad impact and like the addressable market that we have with this type of
Yeah. Well, I
product.
would imagine there's a massive TAM and many use cases for something like Hebbia. And if we talk about, and maybe what we can do is an example, and maybe not sharing an example customer, but a use case where,
Yeah.
let's say there's a complex M&A deal and there's a law firm helping close that and there's millions
Right.
of documents. How
Mhm.
can someone sort through those? And back in the day, it was probably pen and paper and took more man hours. What I'm hearing you say is Hebbia can save these companies millions of dollars and thousands
Right.
of hours.
Exactly.
So how do you do that? So what
Yeah.
AI technologies is Hebbia
Yeah.
using? And if you're tuning in, bust out the pen and pencil and let's take some notes because
Yeah.
AI recruiting is in a hot talent war and there's
Mhm.
some niche and different technologies versus say a traditional SaaS or a mobile app company that you're recruiting for, Scott. And these folks,
Mhm.
well, they're hard to source and hard to close because everyone wants to hire them right now. And so,
Mhm.
what are some of those AI technologies? And let's talk about some of the profiles.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot to unpack there. So I'll start with like just there's the, household, ideas of what AI is. And I think what we all are interacting most frequently with is like your chat GPT, your Claude, these OpenAI, Anthropic, Cohere, these big
Yep.
foundational
Yep.
model builders. Um, on that side, it's building the most robust, capable, optimized, best trained foundational models. They're running on tons of GPU power. They have tons of research scientists doing all of the and optimizing of these models. That's
Right.
that's kind of like the foundational layer of where we sit, and it's a different space, but they're building language models, or now getting into multimodal, where they're trained on immense number, masses of data, and they're able to predict the next most likely word in a sentence based on a prompt or a query that you run.
Right.
Now, there's this other field, which, the origins are called RAG, retrieval augmented generation. That's essentially our origin story. We were the first to productionize and commercialize, RAG in an actual professional setting with running customers. That is essentially enabling this concept of semantic search. Um,
Right.
you need the language model to kind of understand the semantic nuances when you're running search, and you need to oftentimes find specific pieces of information in large data sets that you want to run retrieval over. And that's like the main use case of where RAG comes into play. So now I'll quickly tie it to like your question. Say you're that, private equity analyst or asset
Right.
manager, and you have this M&A document, you have this credit agreement, and you need to find, what are the terms, or, who's on the board, or, these very small, minute things that you can't
Yeah.
quite control F because it's not
Yeah.
a word for word. There's
Yeah.
a lot of like semantically rich context there that you need
Yep.
to be able to retrieve, but you have a 700-page document that you have to do that over.
Sure.
So where it takes 7 hours for a human to comb through, you can apply this concept of RAG to conduct semantic search across that document, retrieve
Wow.
it, kind of querying against the language model. So like the workflow is essentially, Hebbia or like a RAG provider will ingest this document that you're running search across, index that, and store it within a vector database. That could be your Weaviate, your Pinecone. And then you're using the language model to prompt and query against that kind of index data store based on what's most relevant semantically. So it's kind of like it's an ecosystem where it all kind of intersects. And there's so many use cases there. Now the thing is, RAG is not perfect. It's a great concept. That
Yeah.
was like our origin story. We're no longer using traditional RAG. It's kind of janky. It has a lot of inefficiencies. The search quality isn't that great. So there is like a little bit of a secret sauce that these fine engineers have come up with,
Yeah.
that enables us to kind of solve for those things with a much higher quality of retrieval.
Yeah.
But that puts us as sitting in this application layer on top of the foundational models. I think, and Altman said this, like those are the companies that are truly set up for success. I
Yep.
think as we're building these AI startups, if you're too tethered and all in on one model this
Mm-hmm.
early, thinking that that's going to be the one, it's like,
The one. Yeah.
betting on Ask Jeeves in 2001 or something. And
DOA.
yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want to be making that move. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so basically, I think the exciting part is as these new models are getting better, more capable, new O1 Strawberry is released, the latest Claude is released, we're able to plug and play with that model and immediately reap the benefits of
There you go.
these more optimized models.
So we have a lot of vernacular there to unpack if you're not in the AI space, just kind of summarizing, Scott's talking about these LLMs, these large language models, and
Yes, sir.
how right, and Anthropic and Claude and OpenAI and ChatGPT, which by the way is generative pre-trained transformers, are that foundational layer, and Hebbia lives on top of that, and started with RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and that's kind of where you started as a company, Hebbia, and have since optimized and maybe built a new secret sauce, which we're not going to open the kimono on today. But if you want to know more, maybe message Scott and his team as an engineer if you're tuning in today. But what that does is allows that AI to generate answers based on like up to the date, specific, real time information. So instead of just pre-trained information, which
Exactly.
which when we first started using ChatGPT, the answer you would get is our model is up to date as of April 2021 or something, and
Right.
a lawyer needs answers today about yesterday's document. So
Right.
okay, so we're up to speed now, Scott. So there's some deep tech and some niche tech going on, and some really exciting, like cutting edge stuff happening at Hebbia. Now, as a recruiting leader and
Mhm.
as a recruiter who's trying to find candidates that align with this, these technologies, well,
Mhm.
recruiting's changed. Fundamentally, it's changed over the past couple of years. And when
Right.
we chatted, oh man, we were bantering last time about how it's changed, both with
Yeah.
sourcing and recruiting strategies at a startup,
Mhm.
both as it differentiates from FANG companies like say Google and Netflix, but
Mhm.
also just October 2024 is different than October 2023 and definitely than 2022 because of the tools and infrastructure that we have. So
Mhm.
Tell us a bit about your sourcing strategy, your sourcing philosophy, really
Mm.
your talent attraction theory at Hebbia, and
Yeah,
what levers are you pulling? Maybe let's talk about some of the tools, the kinds of tools that work and don't work. How are you attracting those top tier machine learning type candidates and
yep.
convincing them to interview at Hebbia versus maybe a package that's more liquid? Just fill us in.
Totally fair. It's the most competitive environment I think it's ever been right now. It's only going to
Wow.
get more so. And yeah, it's totally evolved. I've noticed some interesting things along the way as we're calibrating, as we're putting people through assessments and seeing where they kind of stack up and where that hidden talent might be. I've got to say that like the a big part of you know my philosophy, our philosophy here is just keeping talent density absolutely top of mind when we think about where our
Right.
bar is. I think that talent density piece is just like an organic magnet. People want to be challenged. People want to be working
True.
around incredibly bright people.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes, if it's a bit of a gamble on, with an early stage startup, if you've got the right people there already, they're going to want to learn and grow and be challenged in that environment. And you really can't beat that aspect of the people. So makes the search all that much harder to maintain that high talent bar, but
Up
but promise
1%.
me,
That's a small TAM.
but it pays out in dividends truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
With that comes the sell as soon as candidates are coming in and meeting with the engineers. When it comes to referrals, I think that's one of the greatest networks, that we can be,
Oh yeah.
valuing.
Yeah.
Quick plugs, the Swarm, I think has been a really cool tool for us to untap some of those or uncover some of those untapped, referral networks through like, your second degree, first degree connections amongst the network of all of the employees of a company, which is really been
Yeah.
really cool. Separately, I think there's definitely, when we raised our Series B with some massive funding, that definitely helps.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Some big VCs writing
yeah,
a check can help attract some
that
talent for
helps.
sure.
That I'd have to, I'd be lying if I didn't say that that definitely
Yeah.
helped us open up, the pipeline to get some great talent. Um, Separately from that, I think it's like, just keeping your like finger on the pulse of the market.
Yeah.
People are, you know, engaged in regular conversation on like AI Twitter, kind of just like
Yeah.
tinkering around with their own side projects in this space. And even if it's not maybe the work that they're doing today, they clearly show a strong interest in it. Like, we're hitting them up. Like we're talking, this could be a great opportunity for you to jump in. I think there's obviously like the natural, bias for some of like the really strong engineering teams at certain companies, that have known to have that between
Yeah.
Robinhood and, Square and, all those folks. Something that's kind of interesting I've also noticed is like we've, building, now we're talking maybe more about like the engineering side, building in this space in AI, like there's no one's truly figured it out. There's no like, oh, you're building a CRM. I've built a CRM before. I can come and do that. It's like,
Right. Right. Apples to apples is a little further in this space.
no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
like,
You need
yeah,
smart people that can build something new, probably. So how do you find
something
those people?
new.
Right. Right.
I think you look for people that have had to stretch themselves in a similar problem space where
Okay.
there's immense ambiguity, where they really have to be self reliant, autonomous. They have to be great at unblocking themselves.
Yeah.
They have to have really strong fundamentals and
Yeah.
uh, good intuition based on those fundamentals. So it's kind of funny that like I find folks often in like Web3, blockchain, crypto, although it's, we're not working in smart contracts, like it's still a very, fringe case, like new sector where it's people that enjoy the nuance of a new challenge, a new territory,
Yeah.
white canvas. So those folks actually have, they've done well through our assessments, and we have
Wow. So
quite a
you
few
have this
folks in
archetype.
there.
You found this archetype from maybe a different domain. We're talking Web3 crypto, but because it was new and because they had a strong, computer science or engineering background, they're actually adapting well at Hebbia from a platform or,
Yeah,
senior suite perspective we're talking. Right, right.
I think also there could be a bias that like
Yeah.
crypto. I'm still a crypto fan.
Yeah.
what, it's the hot thing, it's the next wave, it's interesting tech. People are similar feeling that about AI. Oh, it's the next wave, it's the hot thing. I want to
Yep.
jump into that. So I think
Yeah.
there's,
You're going to get that interest level. Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
interest level is there. Separately, though, I think, we have a bunch of like former YC founders. I think that YC network is extremely valuable.
Right.
So making sure that, I argue that it's not our talent team that's just recruiting, it's the whole team that's recruiting. I
It's all hands
make
on
sure
deck.
every
Yeah.
engineer is always recruiting and they're tapping their networks. So we've seen a lot of success through like YC networks as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing all hands on deck. Recruiting is everyone's participation and shared responsibility. And you
Yeah.
talked about a shout out to the Swarm. I was a beta user of the Swarm and a big fan of that talent mapping internal networks. It works, it's referrals at scale. And so couldn't agree more. And let's talk about other flavors of sourcing tools that
Yeah.
work. I think this is important to unpack because, historically we've had, let's call it manual market mapping tools or sourcing tools that
Yeah.
work. And now they have some AI conversational components like Seek Out Recruit. Allows you to manually source and has some AI components to
Mhm.
filter, and that's awesome. And
Yeah.
now there's also fully automated recruiting
Mhm.
tools, and we've talked about some of these where
Mhm.
you can actually give directions via job description and calibrated feedback and be kind of submitted or provided short lists of candidates. And this is a new, I would call it, field of recruiting tools. And maybe
Totally.
if you want to share how and why you're testing some of these tools, I think it's important to talk about as talent leaders
Yeah.
what's new in TA tech as well.
Yeah. Totally agree. And especially as an AI forward company, I think you have to be filling your tool belt with all of the latest, AI hacks that might make you more productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of what you mentioned, and something else that I've found very interesting is, Dave over at Juicebox, this tool, People GPT, is really quite interesting, particularly because they're using RAG, and they're able to synthesize data across tons of data sets between LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, and you're using natural language queries, rather than rigid Boolean searches to
There you
run
go.
search, and it's
Yeah.
kind of crawling the entirety of what it's indexed there. And then you can get into what you said. You're throwing in job descriptions, and it's making that match for you. You can, filter by, especially for us, where it's like we like to see builders that have gone 0 to 1, in a hyperscale, top VC
Right.
backed startup. They have filters that you can say, okay, I want candidates from, that were at a Series B backed by Andreessen Horowitz, and you can get down to that level of granularity. You could even say that have raised more than 100 million. So like what they can
Wow.
do with filters now is really quite impressive. But I think it's exciting to see, what is next in as
Yeah.
AI kind of gets baked into our workflows.
It
And
kind of
of
reminds
course,
me of how being a recruiter's role has changed, and tools like the one you mentioned,
yeah,
people GPT. What I'm hearing is that recruiters might need to adapt to become more talent architects to understand
yeah,
the archetype and the architecture of a search to know, oh, let's search for this region, New York, this scale stage, Series B to C to D, and
hmm,
someone who's gone 0 to 1.
hmm,
Whereas maybe someone who's newer to recruiting would not know to even search for that. And they're the maybe flavor of that traditional order taking, simple Boolean type searching. And that
hmm,
works in some organizations in some time periods. But Hebbia is looking for recruiters that maybe are more of that talent architect type. And if you're tuning in and that's you, hit Scott up. But I think what we're talking about is how AI is changing recruiting now, not just for AI companies, but the
yeah,
entire industry. And and with that, it's changing everything, but the interview process, right? And so, I
yeah,
remember when we talked last, we're talking about this whole archetype that you're looking for, and how once you have someone engaged, you need to keep them engaged, especially if they're a referral, right, from say an executive at Hebbia.
hmm,
And the way we used to interview, well, that probably needs to be optimized too. So you shared a bit about this. I was pretty excited to hear about how you've like adapted and pivoted and optimized the
hmm,
interview process. And if
hmm,
you want to unpack that for us today, I think that'd be fun to hear too.
yeah, for sure. yeah, for again keeping it kind of specific to engineering, we're pretty traditional and like general format that you have your coding assessment, your system design assessment, and then an on-site assessment.
Got it.
Um, for before that process, I believe really firmly, like, to really stand out in candidate experience and get immediate rapport with top talent, you need to be able to speak the language. You know,
Couldn't agree more. Say that
I
again.
yeah, I
I mean, louder for the people in the back. If you're a recruiter and want to
yeah,
connect and build a relationship with the talent,
yeah,
speak their language.
yeah. This was entirely a foreign language when I joined. Like full heads up. But the engineers here have sat down in countless whiteboards teaching me what the heck RAG and this stuff actually is, and it pays out. I don't believe entirely in like the hiring manager screen. I think that's like, if they need to get some type of technical signal, I think
Yeah,
that a talent team should be calibrated enough to gather that. And it's just kind of getting them up to that bar in terms of understanding the
agreed.
stack and the problems we're solving. And then you can just cut out your time to fill reduces. You're throwing them straight
There you
into
go.
assessments. The engineers are feeling, more valued, and, their time isn't wasted with just hey, what's your name? What's your comp? All right. We'll
Yeah,
see you later. So I think that's been awesome. It also just gives you more trust and credibility when pushing back or advocating
agreed.
with, your stakeholders. So that's my short rant on that. But the assessments, I think our approach has always been like, people don't want to go through, they want to feel valued, and they want to
Yeah,
do what they love when they can. You want to play into their curiosity through your process so that it's truly demonstrative of what they're doing in this job. So,
yeah.
our coding assessment is like, here, implement an algorithm to build a feature that's on our app. That's the coding assessment,
Oh, there
right?
you
And
go.
it's in Python. We also offer Byteboard, which I should have mentioned earlier. I think it's a really awesome take-home tool. They're up and coming, and they've
Right.
been phenomenal. But that's like, this is a really hands-on real life example where candidates are walking away like, oh, that was cool. Like
That
this,
was fun too. Yeah, they're
yeah,
engaged.
that
Yeah.
was fun. I didn't know I could do that, and now they're engaged. And it's not leak code. No one is excited for leak code. They all are like, worried if it's going to be a leak code question. Then with the system design, like very similarly, it's here's our, we'll give a quick demo. Here's our platform.
Yeah.
This is the interface. These are some of the requirements that it operates under. Like, how would you architect this thing? Like,
Yeah.
how would you piece together a back end that kind of meets some of these requirements. um, and once again, it gets them thinking, and it helps us kind of pick up on their intuition. It's
Yeah.
we like to just follow their thought process and rationale to approaching complex problem solving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the on-site itself is like a true build day. It's cool. They come in and they basically build an app 0 to 1, and they demo it to a couple of engineers at the end of the
Oh,
day.
wow.
And the we've I'll tell you about the iterations we've made. It has been, we want you to build the first version of Hebbia. You're going to build semantic search,
Oh,
um,
interesting. Yeah,
work with vector databases. And for a lot of people, this was super novel. They had never seen this technology,
I can
and it
imagine.
was
Yeah.
great signal because we could see them stepping into an environment with totally new technology and having to use that intuition to navigate and figure it out. The most interesting thing that I've seen literally just over the last, like, 6 months is
Sure.
like, people are building this stuff now. It's not that novel anymore. Like,
Right. Right.
we
So
got
you have to adapt. There you go.
we got to adapt.
Yeah.
We're getting false signal if we're looking for somebody's ability
Oh,
to navigate ambiguity, and
yeah.
they already have a bunch of side projects that they're building RAG systems in their current company. It's like,
Wow.
well, no, like, that's pattern matching, and that's not gonna enable us when the industry pivots and there's a completely new tool, or there's a different schema that we have to adapt to in these language models. So we have a new version, very exciting, very interesting.
Yeah.
I can't share too much about it here, but we've gotten some really awesome feedback, and it's the same kind of concepts,
Yeah.
a day in the life.
Well, I think if you're tuning in as a talent leader at a startup, especially an AI startup, what we're hearing is adapt and pivot. This space is changing so fast that the interview process has to accommodate and change with it, or it will be lost in time. And so, what I'm hearing is that you and the talent team and Hebbia as a company are truly continuing to adapt and optimize according to where the market is, where
Hmm.
candidates that you're looking to hire are,
Hmm.
and I think that's the takeaway here is continually iterate as a talent leader to win in this talent war.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you'll be left in the dust to those that are. And much has changed. You mentioned just 6 months ago you had this novel interview process, and now fast forward to today, and you have a new one, and probably 6 months from now, and 12 months from now, the whole world will probably be different. We
Yeah.
have an election coming up in a few weeks. A
Hmm.
lot of other factors globally that could influence the labor market,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I guess I'll ask you a kind of the question I love asking every guest, which is, if you had a crystal ball, what is your personal, what's your Scott forecast for the talent market nationally? Let's focus nationally, and especially in AI. I think there's almost two answers here.
Yeah.
What's your take, man?
I'm a, I guess you could call me a bull.
Okay.
I think that obviously right now there's a lot going on, geopolitically, and just election uncertainty, and it has people feeling uneasy. I think that that's normal for this type of year, for this
Oh yeah.
point in our cycle. I think that AI by no means is a bubble or a fad. I think this is very much here to stay. Um,
Agreed.
and
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic for an awesome 2025. I think that we're going to see competition increasing. I think we're going to see certain, maybe we start to see like the really, kind of like the leading players start to really rise and find a little separation from the pack.
Yeah.
Um, it's an even more competitive space for new folks to try and step in. And I think that's, an advantage that we're really trying to run with, like kind of being a
Yeah.
first mover in this space. And we just got to
Yeah.
keep foot on the gas.
Yeah.
But I'm optimistic. That'll always be part of
Me
my
too.
attitude.
Me too, man. Yeah, well, we share that. I'm a serial optimist, and I'll share what I really feel, at the on the show here, and today, what I'm seeing is, and just to kind of summarize some of my learnings from getting to know you and Hebbia is there's a trend towards RTO. Hebbia is based in New York, hiring in New York, and I'm seeing that with other friends in the space, other clients in the space, and it's
Mhm.
regional, and so that
Mhm.
does change the TAM, that changes the market mapping, talent mapping, and entire recruiting strategy, but that's a trend. Fully remote roles are reducing.
Mhm.
And if you're a recruiter or a recruiting leader, what I'm hearing is that as an industry, we need to adapt and learn the tools that are modernized for our work. And some of
Mhm.
those tools reduce our administrative tasks,
Mhm.
optimize how we interview, take notes, schedule, and certainly source. And so if you're a recruiter looking for a new role, whether you have one or not, do some research, play around with those tools, and learn how AI can change your sourcing strategy. And hopefully
Mhm.
that helps your next interview. And as a talent leader, what I'm hearing is the interview process is fundamentally changing. We haven't talked about the F word yet, fraud, but
Right.
it's
Right.
happening
Right.
on both ends of the hiring process, fraudulent jobs and fraudulent
Right.
candidate interviews. I think it needs to be talked about more. I have on this show before. I see
Yeah.
your head nodding, and I think, and I'll ask you if you've experienced that, and then we can kind of share with the market that we just need to have open discussions. When there is, say, false actors, whether they're domestic or international, we need to adapt as an industry with how to stay safe. And so,
Mhm. Mhm.
is that something you've experienced? And are there any final parting words for our audience about fraud on both sides of the interviews?
Um, just stay vigilant.
Yeah,
It happens. I think, honestly have some empathy when it does happen, although
there you go.
it might not feel good. It's happened to me, and reached out with a fake LinkedIn, pretending to be someone else, and got on the interview, and it wasn't them at all. And I was like, at first, I was like kind of insulted, but then I got like,
Yeah,
wow, like this. I'm sorry that you have to do this to get competitive in this market, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to be vigilant and look for the cues that might suggest that, but also be understanding that it's a tough market and everyone's trying to figure
Yeah.
out their own way. But we'll see how tricky these fraudsters kind of get in the future. They're getting pretty good.
Well, I hear there's a term, heart-led leadership. You just mentioned the word empathy. I think we can all use a little of that in times like these. So I think that's a nice way to end our podcast today, man. Scott, super grateful you joined the Lean In show. It was a pleasure having you. I've learned
Of
a lot
course,
getting to know you.
it's been
Hebbia is
awesome,
doing
man.
some real cool stuff. So I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Bye, everyone.